Hello, everyone, and welcome to class. This semester, we are going to be fully asynchronous and online. And so I thought I would put together this video in order to formally welcome you to the class, get you oriented with how things will run, and provide some general breakdown about not just the class, but about myself as your instructor. I know in online classes sometimes there is a pretense or misconception that you're not allowed to engage with me. That's not true. You are welcome to engage with me, and I want to make that very clear in this introduction video. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself for a second, and then I'll jump into what the class will be about. I'll go over the syllabus with you all in the video, and I'll also talk about some other details pertaining to the class that you'll need to know about. So, without further ado, I will go ahead and just run through a little bit about me. So there's a picture of me right there, so you know what I look like if you see me around campus or around Knoxville. You don't have to be afraid. You can say hello. I won't bite or snarl or do any type of rude remark at you. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and raised between there and Baltimore, Maryland. A lot of my time as a youngin was spent basically exploring video games. That was really what I enjoyed doing, what my passion was. What interesting fact about me is, in terms of college, I actually did not want to go to college. So I don't know how many of you are in this class who probably experienced the same thing, but my original plan was to go into the military after finishing high school. But I got sick and I was unable to do so. So the other alternative was college, of course. And I'm glad I did go. I enjoyed my time at Towson University, which is where I got my undergrad. Although I do omit that I started at community college and transferred to Towson. So if you started at community college as well and transferred to a four-year university, I can relate to you pretty well. I finished up at Towson with a bachelor's of science in geography and environmental science. I was a dual major as well, so I also had a major in history and then a lot of minors. So I went from somebody who didn't want to be in college at all and basically became a huge nerd. And I guess I already was a nerd because I played a lot of video games, but things kind of transitioned from not being, I guess, a book nerd to becoming more of a book nerd. I don't know. It was a weird spiral. I ended up going to Louisiana State University for a master's where I focused climatology, and I did a lot of applied climatology studies. If you don't know what that is, that's essentially taking data that is detected via sensors in the environment and then using that data in order to deduce some type of pattern in long term meteorological phenomena. And I studied lightning frequency in Louisiana for my thesis, looking at how different surface types and therefore latent and sensible heat would influence the amount of lightning that occurred over a particular area within the state of Louisiana. And then for my PhD, I went to the University of South Carolina. There, I studied microclimatology, but I also studied macroclimatology. I looked at drought and pluvial. Pluvial means like extreme precipitation regimes or anomalously high precipitation regimes. And that was what I studied at the University of South Carolina. I finished my PhD in 2020. It was a perfect time because it was the height of the pandemic. So I basically watched all of my job offers fizzle up into thin air, and the only two I had left were in California. So I moved out to California for about a year and a half and lived out there and worked out there, and then came back after my wife got a job here at the University of Tennessee as well. So I've worked in data science, web development, energy, agriculture, higher ed, really a lot of different fields. And I've done that because I have a broad interest in a variety of topics and a variety of subjects. I'm just a really curious person. I love investigating different things, and that's taken me to different fields. For a moment, I even worked in blockchain, which was like totally left field from what I studied in school. A little bit more about me. Hobbies, as I've already said, pretty big nerd. So just about everything. You see, I have Warhammer and Demon Slayer over here. I love anime. I love science fiction, fiction, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. If you put some of those puns or references in your classwork, I'd love it. It will make my day. I also do a lot of 3D printing, a lot of writing. If you want to keep up with my writing, I do write on a personal blog, but I also write on medium.com. You can find me there under Nick Sokol, and you can see all of my publications there. I am a flock father. After my wife and I moved to Tennessee, we acquired some chickens, and we originally started with 6 chickens, and they hatched a bunch of eggs. That's mom right there with some of the chicks that she's hatched. And now we're up to 14. So if you're thinking about getting into raising chickens, just know that they multiply quickly. And yeah, it can get out of hand, but it's a lot of fun. Community engagement. I do a lot of work with a lot of different groups and nonprofits in Knoxville. I work with United Way. I work with Rooted East. Battlefield Farms, Knoxville Garden Alliance, really focus on developing like sustainable and clean food and using different scientific techniques and innovations in order to do that. And so, one more thing that I thought I should talk about before the class starts this semester in particular, I have my first child on the way in the next 3 months. So, um, in addition to everything else I'm doing, the business I run called Algeo, I run that business, but it's also in partnership with Oak Ridge National Lab. So I do a lot of work with Oak Ridge, I do a lot of work on the business. I'm teaching, et cetera, et cetera. You can kind of see where I'm going with all of this, which means my time is like very, very, very limited. So, um, you know, keep in mind, I put here that I'm what's called a professor of practice, not a research professor. For those of you who are not aware of the difference, a research professor is basically somebody who lives and breathes being in academia. They primarily focus on publishing papers, teaching a few classes, and pulling in grants for their respective department. And that's their main focus. As a professor of practice, I am more so of a applied professor. So I work in industry. That is my main focus. And then I bring the experience that I gather from working in industry back into the classroom to pass on to my students. And so the official title, I guess, for a research professor would be assistant professor or associate professor or just professor. And then for me, I'm what would be called a teaching assistant professor or professor of practice. So, all that to say, I know that's a lot of new information probably thrown at you, and it's a little bit irrelevant as well. But you'll find that I do like to go on tangents. Um, if you email me, if you're trying to reach out to me or get in touch with me, and I'm not very quick with getting back to you, follow up again. Um, the standard policy is 24 to 48 hours for a response. I would say definitely stick to that. If it's an emergency, mark your email as an emergency, and I'll see the little red exclamation mark in Outlook. And if I still don't get back to you after 48 hours, please, please, please follow up again. Don't wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and then say, Dr. Sokol or Nick, you can call me either or. Don't wait and then say after 3 weeks, you never replied to my email. This was critical information that I needed in order to progress. Be proactive. If you don't hear from me in 48 hours, even after you marked it as an emergency, follow up again. That helps me make sure that I am servicing you properly in this class. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about this class and what you'll be doing this semester. Okay, so this class is Geography 111, which is titled Our Digital Earth. It is being covered in the spring of 2025. It is the first section of the course, and the CRN is 46503. As I just mentioned not too long ago, this is an online and asynchronous course, which means that we will never meet in person unless you want to meet for office hours or have a meeting with me to discuss your progress in the class or course content in the class. In which case, you would just shoot me an email and say, hey, can we set up a virtual meeting or an in person meeting? I do have an office in Birchfield, and we can gather and meet and talk about what it is that you want to talk about. This course is really an introduction to maps, geovisualization, and the geographic process and geographic thinking. And so, a lot of the material that you will be exposed to in this course is introductory, and what that means is as an introductory course, it means you're going to be getting a lot of material, because that is the nature of introductory courses. As you go in the higher level courses, you're going to have much more refined information that is going to be specifically tailored to a certain topic. Whereas in the introductory courses, we're really trying to give you a breadth and depth of the whole field within a semester's worth of time. So, for some people, the introduction courses are often a little bit more difficult than the upper level courses, because you're learning completely new material that you haven't learned before. But fear not, because I'm going to try to make this as easy and as simple of a process for you as I possibly can. I've put some examples here of some geovisualizations or maps, um, or cartographic projections, what have you, here within the syllabus that I particularly find intriguing. This one in the top left, there's actually an activity discussion that you all will be using this map for the first week of class. And then these other two maps are basically supply chain maps. And I think supply chain is one of the probably biggest things related to geography in terms of industry. Um, and so I find these particularly striking because they talk about how resources are distributed across the planet, which is so relevant to all of us. In some shape, fashion, or form, we all utilize resources that come from somewhere else. The laptop that you're viewing this video on likely was made in China and was shipped from China to the US. And then it was trucked from some port in the US to the store that you bought it at. Or if you bought it online, it was trucked from a warehouse to your house via last mile shipping methods. And a lot of people don't think, backwards and trace those steps back as to where those particular products come from and how those resources are produced and look at that whole line. But really, that is something that is extraordinarily intriguing and also highly relevant to our modern world, because as things continue to develop, where things are made, where they're produced, and how much they cost to ship from one place to another is going to become very, very, very important, for all of our lives. So here's some general information for you. Once again, I am Nick Sokol. You can call me Nick or Nicholas. You can call me doctor, professor, what have you. I'm really not picky about it. As long as you're not calling me anything insulting, we'll be all good. Email is nsokol@utk.edu. Office location is Birchfield 414. It's on the fourth floor, around the corner from the GIS lab. I will not be there often. Again, since I am working at the same time on other projects, I'm really only in Birchfield when I need to be in Birchfield. And so my office hours are 12 to 1, but I'm also available by appointment. And so what that means is my office hours are 12 to 1. It doesn't necessarily mean that I will be in Birchfield 414. Although on most days, especially on Tuesdays, I should be in there from 12 to 1 because I have a class right before that 12 to 1 period. So you should find me in there, but some days I may not be in there, and I'll be sure to put that on Canvas if I'm not going to be available. And again, this course is online and does not meet. So you don't have to show up for a Zoom session online. You don't have to show up in a class. If anybody tells you you have to go to a classroom, that is incorrect. This class is online. Everything you need to complete this class is going to be available on Canvas. You will submit all your work on Canvas. And that's the end of that. If something does change, I will email you and let you know. Speaking of emailing and letting you know things, definitely make sure that you have access to your email and that notifications and announcements that are posted on Canvas will pop up or appear in your email account. There are a couple of times where I've had it where I've made announcements on Canvas, and students say they don't get it because they don't have those two linked where the announcements come through in their email. I will probably always make announcements in Canvas just because it's so easy to communicate information that way. Whereas if I do it from my email account, I have to type in all of your email addresses individually. From Canvas, I can just click announcement, type out my message, and it gets sent. So make sure you're monitoring Canvas or you're monitoring your email account so that way you know when things are being updated. This is the course description. I've already talked a little bit about what you'll be doing in this class, but essentially cartography, aerial photography, satellite image interpretation, GIS, remote sensing. We're going to talk about all of these things. You might do a little bit of these things, but you're not going to do a lot that's in depth. Again, this is an introductory course, so this is really about getting a taste of these different topics. You're not really delving into these topics heavily. Online and asynchronous, already talked about that. So I guess one of the things here I should mention is that I put deadlines for the assignments in Canvas, and I put deadlines there to basically help keep you on track for when things should be turned in. And just because things are listed as when they should be turned in doesn't mean you have to turn them in then. There's really no late assignments. Maybe in the syllabus I have somewhere, late assignments will be penalized. I think I took them out, but if it's listed in there, ignore that. There's the final day to turn work in for this class is May 7th, which is the last day of classes for the spring semester. Now, here's my caveat and advice for that. With that, you have that ability and the privilege to turn everything in on May 7th by noon. However, I don't advise you to wait to do everything until May 7th to get it all done and submitted. That is a really surefire way of failing the class. So the deadlines that are posted in Canvas are posted to keep you on track in the class and to make sure that you're turning in work in such a manner that you're not going to overwhelm yourself after a certain point in the semester, and that causes you to perform poorly in the class. So if you keep that in mind, you should be pretty successful, not just in terms of getting things submitted and graded well, but also passing the class with a sterling grade. Learning outcomes for this course. By the end of the course, you should be able to explain the basic concepts and principles of processing digital geographic data. You should know how to collect data to better understand the world. You should know how to use online resources to look at things like aerial photos, satellite images, and maps. You should know how to think spatially and develop problem-solving skills with a geographic context. Demonstrate proficiency in using map-based technologies like Google Earth, GIS, and remote sensing applications. You should be able to identify and critique claims about human behavior and social issues, as well as physical phenomena through geospatial analysis. And you should understand the role of digital maps and geographic data in everyday life and how it can benefit different sectors of industry. Course expectations and policies. I'll let you all go through most of this. This is just basic housekeeping stuff. In terms of plagiarism and other things like that, I can't really, there are checks and balances in Canvas to see if you are blatantly plagiarizing. We have a software that does tell us if a article or document or something that you use is related to something else that has been submitted before. I would say don't blatantly plagiarize. It's an online course, so I know you're going to copy stuff from the internet. I know you're going to copy stuff from AI. I always tell people, if you're going to copy things, cite it or tweak it so that it's in your own words and you put your own thought behind it. So that way it's kind of new content. You're just using an influence from somewhere else to make it your own. Of course, cite it if you are taking pieces of it from someplace else, but always make sure that you try to make that work your original and unique work. Course assessment. So, how will things be graded? You have discussions in this course. So, these will be posted to Canvas, and I'll expect you to reply to the discussions with pretty detailed thought behind them. So, don't give a simplistic answer. I'll know if it's a 5 minute answer. I want to see some thought behind these discussions. I'm not saying you have to write a novel. Really, you should be looking at probably 250 words for your discussion. You can do it less, in less words than that, or you can do slightly more. If you write too much, you'll probably aggravate me a little bit because I have to read all of it and grade it. If you write too little, then you're probably not really addressing the discussion in a cohesive way. So really make sure that you're providing, a reasonable amount of writing for those discussions. Um, I also expect you to kind of engage with other people in the classroom. I know it's an online class, so the tendency ultimately comes down to people just taking the class, turning in what they need to turn in, and then going about their lives. But I would prefer it if you do comment on somebody else's discussion post. Read what they wrote, talk about how maybe it made you think, or something novel in terms of insight that you derive from reading their discussion post. And that goes a long way for procuring all of those 10 points. For the labs, there's 3 labs, and I call them labs, but they're really more activities. And these are, exercises which will have you utilize some geospatial tools. Again, this is an introductory class, so you're not going to be, if you're familiar with GIS, I'm not going to have you working in ArcMap. I'm not going to have you coding things in Python. I might give you a Python script and say, run the script, and what is the result? What happens if you change XYZ? I might. I haven't, that's not final. I'm just giving you an example. Other things I might have you do is go to Google Earth and tell you to zoom in on a couple of different points in Google Earth and provide me with some data based on some of those points that I've told you to go to. Those are the types of activities that you'll be submitting and will be graded online. Quizzes, there are 12 quizzes, 10 points each, 2 drops. So you'll basically have a quiz almost every week going forward in the class. The quizzes are automatic, so you'll take them, you'll get a grade immediately after taking the quiz, and your lowest 2 scores get dropped at the end of the semester. So if you don't perform well on all of the quizzes, there's some saving grace there. If you do perform really well, unfortunately, there's no benefit. I'm not going to give you extra credit for those quizzes. You just can pat yourself on the back that you did really well with those extra quizzes. The last thing is going to be a final project in the course, and this is kind of the bulk of your grade. Another part that's a bulk of your grade. The labs, which are 3 of them at 50 points each, is a big portion of your grade, and the final project is a big portion of your grade. The final project will basically see you utilize some of the skills and knowledge that you've gained in this class to do a project that focuses on geographic thought and thinking. So I'll have you pick the topic. You'll use the skills that you've learned for finding data or using some geospatial tool in order to essentially write up a report about a particular topic. So you could write about population density across the state. You could write about different precipitation patterns across the state. You could write about locations of different grocery stores in Knoxville. Any of those things would be of interest. And I encourage you to come up with something that you're passionate about to do a project on. You don't have to take my ideas. There will be a final project document posted later in the semester that provides some more guidance about the final project, and you can use that to develop your project for the class. For grading in this class, we have discussions. Again, this is just kind of reiterating what was up above. Discussions, labs, quizzes, and the final project, which is a total of 400 points. And then you would take your points earned divided by your total points, and that would give you your final grade in the class. It's the typical grading division or classification. If you have a 93 or above, you get an A. If it's a 90 to a 92.9, it's an A minus, so on and so forth. No extra credit will be offered in this course. All the work that is provided to you is more than enough.